Yo, 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. This is the Beat People podcast number 86, hosted by myself, Ken Flux Pierce and Trovarsi. Today is June 18th. It is 12 p.m. Pacific. And we got Mario Hernandez of Elektron up in here. And we're gonna be talking about the Syntakt and all things Syntakt. So consider this episode 86, the Syntakt talk. Let's have that talk. Yo, ho, ho, ho.
Yo.
I just want to say that, just like you said a moment ago, Trovarsi, this has been a long time. We haven't, all of us haven't been on a show together in a long time. So
I know, it's wild.
crazy. And while we're all, everyone except for Mario, all in some state of recovering COVID. So if you hear anybody cough or, whatever, that's why. So now you know. And we're gonna have some fun. What's up, Mario?
What's up, Corey? How's it going? Thank you again for having me here. Excited. Feels kind of like we're all back together. I know we saw each other at NAMM for a quick second, but at least now we can.
That's why we all have COVID.
That's right. No doubt. It's good to have you here, man. What's up, Ken? Ken's like, what?
Sorry, I had myself muted so that I wouldn't COVID cough all over everyone, and I was getting ready to share the link around. But yeah, I just kind of came back from the deathbed of COVID, and yeah. NAMM was a hell of a super spreader event.
It truly was. But I'm glad we're all still standing. And so let's talk about this Syntakt, though.
Yes, definitely.
I gotta see the chat. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, you all got the chat up. And what's up to the chat? We got Ted, Curry Cases, Cool Doug Love. Cool Doug Love. I love that name. That reminds me of like the classic era of hip hop.
Yeah.
Doug Love. His name is a statement. So yeah, what up to everybody? I met. And why not? If I didn't mention why not? So yeah. So about the Syntakt, I'm just bring the screen up right quick. The Syntakt is new. The latest product from Elektron, 12-track drum computer and synthesizer. And it's dope. And that's all I know. I'm gonna let Mario kind of introduce the product.
Definitely, yeah, all good. Yeah, so as Corey was saying, Syntakt, you guys in the chat, if you know it. If not, it's a 12-track drum computer and synthesizer. Basically, you have 12 tracks of synthesis to use for percussive sounds or synthesized sounds. And the way that it's set up is you have two different synthesis types. And first one being digital, and that's going to be accessed on the first 8 tracks here. And then you have analog tracks, synthesis on these tracks 9 through 12. And as you go through these different tracks, you can start seeing that there's different parameters and different animations. That's because the way that the sound structure is set up is in the digital synthesis section, you have different machines, and these machines are catered to specific type of sounds. Not saying that you're only locked into that, but kind of gives you a starting point. So you have some clap sounds, some snares, and it kind of allows you to just start building up a drum kit, and also just a full instrument composition. And then as you go down into these analog tracks, the same thing applies here. You have different machines that will synthesize different sounds. And the first 3 tracks here, you have the bass drum, snare drum, and then you also have dual VCO synth. So that's basically an analog synth with two oscillators that you're able to just change up, and kind of gives you the bear of the analog synthesis. Whereas these bass drums and snare drums, there's already these pre-made connections like sweep time to the pitch, which waveform you're doing the whole time. So it's kind of hones in on the synthesis to just let you focus on making some dope sounds. So this one right here, there's on the Syntakt, as if you're familiar with it, it has the same kind of workflow and signal flow as the Digi series. So if you go here, as I was going through this page, this is your synth page, and here you have access to all the parameters of that machine, depending on which machine is selected. And then as that you're done shaping your sound there, the audio goes into a filter, and on the digital tracks, you have a digital multi-mode filter. So you have your normal low pass and some high pass, and then also some EQs with different Q settings. So you could go there and really shape it with the envelope follower as well. So you could really find the sweet spots of the synthesis and help make it knock a little bit harder. You also have a dedicated high pass, low pass on the digital tracks. And once those goes through the filter, then you have an amp page. So this is going to be your volume and then also your delay and reverb sends. And the way that the delay and the reverb works is that they're kind of like returns. It's a master delay and reverb. So the track sends are sending it to that, and then you could press function and select which effect you want to change the parameters for. So if I go here, so even though it's just those two effects, there's a lot of stuff you could do alongside with the sequencer parameter locks and stuff, which we could get into. But right here, you also have 2 LFOs for those tracks. So 8 tracks. Each of these tracks, it's going to have this same thing laid out, just depending on what you have selected on the machine. And the LFOs are really dope because you could send them to any of these parameters for the sound. So you could start doing some weird tuning. So that's a kick sound, but it's a kick machine, but this is kind of like a synth now, some weird effects. So you could kind of see where you could start changing stuff and make some very unique sounds with the LFOs to modulate the parameters. And then on the second LFO, you have the ability to send to modulate the first LFO's setting. So you could do some kind of things where it's kind of cross-modulating. It's modulating the LFO one. So every time you hit something, you could be changing the sound on there. And then here on the analog tracks, it's set up the same way, like I said, on these tracks with the signal flow. It's just these are actually analog circuits, analog oscillators. And when I have this track selected, when you go into the filter, as I said before, they're analog filters and it's multi-mode. So you have different filter shapes that you could start shaping the sound. And then, like I said, on these first 3 tracks, it's the analog drum. So analog drum means you have bass drums, snare drums, rim shots, impulses. That's available on all of the analog tracks, a dual VCO. Synth, so let me go to this one. And here you could really start to hear these filters work. Let me go into chromatic mode. So in
Crazy.
in basically you have the ability to have 3 of those selected on each of these machine tracks. So you don't have to stick with just one on each. If you want to have 3 dual VCOs, you could do that. Copy this track, paste, paste. So it's kind of in a way you have monosynth, but if you wanted to, you could make it a polysynth by using this. So there's just a lot of different ways that you could actually use the tracks and set them up how you want per pattern, because all the information gets saved into these patterns. And in a project, you have 8 banks, and within those 8 banks, you have 16 patterns. And that's going to hold all your information, all of your sound information, your sequence information, any effects routings that you have set, and modifiers. And since I mentioned that, we could just talk about the modifiers real quick and the effects track.
Mhm.
So what's new on the Syntakt is going to be the modifiers. You have these 4 right here because you only have these 12 tracks. So with these buttons here, you can see it's illuminated this orange color. And if I hold function, I could change which modifier is selected. The first 2 modifiers are normal to a parameter, and the first one is retrig. So if I hold function retrig and up or down, I could set it up, and you can see I have these beat division values, and that's going to correlate to what track I'm selected on. So now that's just a lot easier to apply retrig opposed to having to parameter lock it in or try and play it with your
And then retrig and something like that is going to retrig whatever the highlighted instrument is, right? Or whatever the active instrument is.
correct.
So right now
Yes.
you have instrument number 2, which is the snare. But if you selected a different instrument, those retrigs will then apply to that, the retrig button.
Correct. So track 1, track 2. And then if you go, you can trigger more than one. So if you do something like this, it gets kind of crazy, but you can do some weird stuff with that. But it is on the selected track that you have. That's what the retrig, the modifiers are going to modify that track. So the next one is going to be velocity, and it does exactly what you would think it does. You have 4 values of velocity here.
Dope.
And then modifier A and B are assignable. So this one, you could select a parameter that you want to apply different modifiers to. So if I go to
so they become like performance macros at that point.
Exactly.
For the synth that's selected.
Yep. So this one I have the delay send. So now when I go to this higher, let me change these settings a little bit. If I go to this higher one, it's sending more to the delay send versus this one not sending anything.
Yeah, that's dope.
And then this can be applied to any of the, not every parameter, but in terms of the synth page, it's going to be the tune, the decay, and the overdrive, and then you have everything else after that. If I go to tune, you could kind of make like a 4 scale, 4-note scale there. But speaking of, before I get into chromatic, my bad, modifier B is just the same thing, just a different location. So you have up to 2 different destinations for per pattern.
Dope.
But
well, let's pull back a little bit because I want to be able to take some questions, and I also want to ask, because as you were going through, like the one thing that pops out in my mind a lot about, hold on, pop out of here. The one thing that stands out in my mind a lot is just like, yo, this joint, which is not unlike other Elektron drum machines and synths. It's like a sound designer's wonderland.
yeah,
So much sound design capability and flexibility and stuff. And I know I got a chance to design some sounds on there. Trovarsi got a chance to design some sounds on there. We both actively held Ken away from the situation, so he could not. No, I'm just kidding.
I feel like Elektron was mad at me because I got rid of my rhythm.
They had the tracker on it, right? The rhythm tracker. So, Trovarsi, let me ask you, when it comes to the Syntakt, how'd you approach your sound design stuff that you did for it?
Oh, I approached it I had to think about that for a second. Sorry. God, because it does so much, like, well, first of all, it was so long ago, and then I got like this crash course on it. So it was very much, I mean, but I've already been familiar with the Electron workflow, which somebody I think asked about it. But so that was like half the battle, I think. You know what I mean? Like learning to navigate. So for me, it was I started with the initial sounds, and then I created sounds based on the vibe I was built, and I started building a pattern in a song, or like a song or pattern for a track. And then I approach it the same way with modular. It was like a very basic set of first, a very basic structure, and then I started to peel through the layers and started shaping and sculpting to kind of have everything work and fit together. And that's how I started creating my sounds. So I didn't specifically go to one sound and then just stay on that sound for an extended period of time. I just kept going around it, if that makes sense. Like, you know what I mean? I like a drum groove, and I was like, oh no, I think that needs to be tweaked a little bit. I want a little bit more harmonics here. And then through that process, I created my sounds.
Well,
Yeah.
before you dive too deep into that, let me ask a couple of quick questions for those of us who don't have a Syntakt and haven't really worked on one. The analog drums that are in there, is it using the same chip basically that was used for the rhythm? Is, like, for instance, I saw that there's dual VCO in there. Is that the same dual VCO that's in the Rhythm MK2? Are those mostly all the same analog circuits that were there, or are they different, or are some the same and some different?
They are different and they're improved. So for in particular the dual VCO one, improved tracking, pitch tracking on the higher registers. That was something that was not the best on the Rhythm Mark II.
Yeah. I remember
That's that they honed in on. And then also the filter as well. It's there's different filter types than there were on the Mark II as well. So they are different circuits. They inspired by the Rhythm, but made the tweaks when they applied it to the Syntakt.
Interesting. Yeah, because that was one of the things, like the Rhythm. I got rid of mine not because I didn't like how it sounded. I actually loved how it sounded, but just the workflow of what it wasn't really for me. But the more I keep looking at the Syntakt, I like the small form factor of it. I kind of like the layout of it. For, like, the Rhythm has a little bit of a mental hang up for me when I see the pads and everything. I kind of want to work in a certain way, but that's not really the way that it works. And when I look at this thing, I'm like, oh man, maybe I should give that thing a try, because I kind of like that form factor and all. The digital side of it, are those all new digital drums, or are any of those harkening back to like the machine drum and that sort of thing, or how's that stuff come about?
Yeah, so the digital ones, there are some new ones, and the ones that are new are going to be these. Let me go here. Toy, bits.
Oh yeah, I love the toy machines.
Clap, and then snare drum vintage. I would say, I mean, the idea of machines comes from the machine drum and mono machine, but these sounds aren't taken from the machine drum, or that. Mainly the same thing, kind of like the Rhythm, the cycle sounds are used inside this, but with that you have like a proper filter and envelope, so it's a little bit different than the cycles, just the sounds its own. But yeah, those are where the sounds come from on the digital side. And what's interesting with it as well is that I didn't get too far into it, but we could get on it a little bit later. But the effects routing, you have the ability to route any of these tracks to an analog effects block that has analog overdrive and then an analog multi-mode filter as well. So technically you could run all of your analog, your digital tracks through that, or have two analog filters for your analog voices, kind of just depending on how you want to route it. And in a way, that's a one thing that I do like about it as well, is that has these specialties of drum synthesis and synthesis, but also kind of like a utility side with that effects block, and also the modifiers, and it being able to send out MIDI and process audio as well.
Dope. So one of the
Corey, I
things,
saw you hold up your machine drum.
yeah, I was holding up the machine drum just because I was gonna say that to me, when I first learned about the Syntakt, I kind of felt like it was like the second calling of the machine drum. You know what I mean? In so many ways, it's obviously very modernized, not just in the physical form, but even in the approach and some of the things. But all the ideas of the machines, it kind of felt like, and I think this is one of those things that people, at least myself, I won't speak for everybody, but this is one of those things. I'll full size the screen right quick.
Yeah. I'll never sell my machine drum.
I'm never selling a machine drum.
Yeah.
And this is, to me, this was one of those things I was like, you know what? I hope Elektron revisits this idea of a digital drum machine in a more substantial sort of casing. And I'm glad to see it kind of reborn, at least to a degree, at least sort of the digital drum machine from Elektron being reborn in the digi format and shape of boxes and stuff. It's a good machine, and it's one of those things that it's so versatile, and it has so much stuff in it. It actually does also have its own sound, even though you kind of have things that some of the TR machines and stuff in there. But it's one of those things that is so versatile. You always find yourself finding new things in it. And so many times I've reached for it in sound design projects. So it's pretty dope. One of the other things, I pull this question up right here because it's a pretty in-depth question, but as far as workflow, I'll just, for myself, with me, and pardon me guys, I'm gonna put this on full screen just so I can see. So for me with workflow, I try to approach every machine pretty much from the same perspective. How I want my drums patterned, how do I want my drum patterns, and what melodic capabilities does a thing have of it. And in this case, you know, this is one of the toy. This is the toy machine. Let's see. And it just has a lot of flexibility there. So if you listen, what you hear right here is the bits machine. And I sort of added that because I was experimenting with, can you all hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was experimenting with the bits machine, and I was like, oh, I can almost simulate sort of digital noise or simulate a broken tape deck or maybe vinyl noise if I throw a LFO on it and just kind of make it move a little bit. So basically that's what I did then. I think that was just me kind of exploring the synthesis of the bit machine. And I didn't want to go too crazy because I had some other melodic parts in there. Then it's just a matter of drum beat. So I laid down a drum beat. Let's see. I think I then put a bass line. Oh, and you know, if you listen to that hi-hat, it's very simple. And I actually turned it down a little low, but I use a little bit of these retrigs, just a little bit every now and then, just to kind of give it a little bit of, and that's the cool thing about Elektron, because once you get your basic patterns laid down, then you can go back and do all kinds of fun tricks, like, you know, whatever it be, probability and all those different things. So once I started adding all this other stuff, to me, at this point, I'm on any man's machine. But where things get specific to Elektron is when you go back and you really start to dig into the sound design. So I actually laid down like the kick and the snare, but then I went back and flipped them according to what I wanted them to be. And then so you see I got a clap in there, and that's basic stuff. And then melodic parts. And a bass line. And that's all digital sounds.
Yeah.
So for me, it really is a matter of making the most sort of the foundation of the joint and going back and really tweaking all of, because I'll even say that the chord machine didn't start off that way when I made this track. And I went back and I tweaked it until I got it sounded the way I wanted it to sound. And so to me, I think sometimes you have to step back when you're using an Elektron machine. Go back to the basics of what you know as your foundation and sort of build your patterns. And then you can kind of go in, or you may even want to start like I did with the first machine. You can start with an idea of what's this machine do? Let me go in and do some sound design and really dig in. And then you'll come out kind of building stuff off of what's inspiring you. So that's the way I approach workflow. And to me too, kind of building towards hip hop, it really makes a difference that you can shape these sounds into almost anything. And then I have it also hooked up to the analog heat, so I can get saturation. And, I even have an envelope follower on there. So it really depends on what you want to do. Workflow is a huge question, but I at least wanted to kind of give you my thoughts on how I approached it. And that's also sort of how I approached sound design on it when I was invited to help out with the sound design. It was a crash course on how this thing works, but I really did a lot of exploring of the sounds and before I could build patterns and stuff. So yeah, just depends on what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. One thing that I found is I'll go in and then I'll have like a set of sounds that kind of start off with, depending on what I'm kind of feeling at the time. If I have an idea that I want to do and I'm kind of honed in, then I'll follow that. But if I'm starting from scratch, there's a cool feature on here that randomizes parameters. So if I press any of these parameter, press yes. Like that. I like how that sounds, and then I can go in and start shaping that. So I'll make that.
I love doing that too, especially when you're feeling a little stuck. It kind of gives you a little push for inspiration.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, no, definitely that. And then if you ever want to make any kind of like small variation of a pattern, you could get there pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And kind of where Corey was talking about, I'll talk about this pattern right here. This one I have set up. I think I just have this sound. The way that I kind of set it up, because I have these analog tracks here, I usually like using the analog tracks for kick, snare, and bass. So it's like kick, snare, dual VCO sometimes, and then like a hi-hat maybe. But because I have my drums here, then I'll put my digital drums on this side as well. So just like quick mute access. And then if I have when I have melodic stuff, I'll keep them like starting from 8 going this way, just so I could have myself visually how I play. So if like, yeah, if the kick's right here, then I know I could just mute both of these, just use one finger kind of thing. And obviously there'll be some melodic stuff right here sometimes, but for the most part, I try to keep it like that. So this is just like a little, for this sound design, I was really trying to push the filter and delay in a way where I wanted it to sound kind of like, instead of it being kind of like a sharp kind of filter envelope where we normally know that's how you get that like, where is it? I wanted to add this little ramp on it to make it kind of like sloop into it, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but and then I have it being sent to the delay a lot. And on the delay track, I have a really short delay time. So it could get kind of but also on the effects track, I have an LFO being sent. Let me go here to the delay time. So kind of doing like a tape delay in a way where this is actually changing the LFO is changing the delay time, so kind of adds this weird space. And then from there, like Corey said, now it's just like go to drums. So this is where I have this kind of 808 sound going, but then I also want like that kick to knock under it. And snares. And it's all about layering for me. This is my kind of like a lower sound, but that's the analog voice, digital. Kind of, they're both on different, both taking up the frequency range, but that's basically my snare sound. And then I think these are more just, it's like four layered snare for that. So if I play all of them. And then I think on this one, I have a parameter lock for each step so that it changes each time.
Yeah, that's dope.
And then,
yeah, that's one of the things that's special about Elektron, that you could do a parameter lock and have something like that to keep the, even if you're doing trap beats and hip hop beats, the Elektron probability and parameter locks is going to allow you to keep some dynamic movement to the thing.
definitely, yeah. And then with that, if you're performing or anything else, recording live with Overbridge or recording just your jam, you have all these tricks with the modifiers and then control all and then the probability. But one thing I also did want to show would be on this pattern, I basically, the way I work, if like I like this where this is at, I'll really like how that sounds. So I'll get this pattern and I'll copy it. And now I could place it anywhere. So if I go to this one, I could actually paste this pattern here. And now I have like a different, I could start changing stuff. So if I go to like this hi-hat, let me see. So I'll just clear this. I'll say I'll take out the kick, the 808. So then that's just like another section. So then I could go from here to this one. But on this one, I have the same pattern and I have the effects routing. So all of these tracks, I have them being routed to this effects block, and I have some drive applied to it. And then this filter, it's a 2-pole notch filter. So it kind of sounds like a phaser if you apply an LFO to it. So I'm applying an LFO to the filter frequency and then also to the panning. So you can hear how that sounds.
That is a pretty damn good tip.
Yeah, that sounds sick.
And then that's how I start creating my tracks. And then it'll be like, either if it's a big one, it'll be a whole bank will take a whole track will take up a whole bank. Most likely not. At most, I'll have like 4 and then 4 here. And the way I've been kind of setting it up is that I'll have 4. These will be like the main kind of intro, main part, verse part, and then like a breakdown, and then like a crazy thing. And then on these ones, I'll have the effects. So like, for example, this one, I could copy this pattern, paste it here. And now instead of that, kind of notch filter thing, I'll do a band pass. And let me change this actually. And now it's going to be kind of like isolator SP404 effect. And that gets saved into that pattern. So again, I could just queue up the next pattern to go in. So that effects track, it's kind of like you have to set it up yourself how you want to do it, but there's so much possibilities of what you could actually do. It also has control of the inputs where you could start affecting audio coming in and use that same concept of using the LFOs and the filters and the amp page and sending it to the delay and the reverb to create an effects box basically with this. If you don't have any pedals or anything, but you want to process audio, then this is a great way to do that while also being able to make some beats on top.
That's dope. That's what's up. So yeah, I mean, so I think we can tell from that the box is pretty flexible. You get it's a hybrid drum machine, but it's also a synth, right? It's just a lot of flexibility there that you could do a lot of things with. It just depends on, I think one bit of it has to do with how comfortable you get with the box and how creatively you can think about the tools that you have at your, because I'd never thought about what you did with that, like a bandpass filter and then an LFO on it, and it kind of acts like a phaser. I wouldn't have thought about that, but that's one of those things. I think the more time you spend with the machine, the more you start to realize, like, oh, well, if I think a little bit outside the box, I could do this, that, or you know, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, and also with that, like, it's all about taking the time. It's easy to get something and try and get the next thing to be like, I need that. But like, if you spend the time, then you actually have that time to think about it. And then you're not so stuck to like one pattern. It's like you're able to, you said it, step back for a minute. You know, sometimes you gotta step back, look at what you're working on, and then you can be like, all right, see it as a whole now, make those little tweaks. And I think that's the workflow I usually go, because I'll lay a bunch of stuff down, but as I'm listening to it, then I'll start shaping the kick so that it's more applied vibe that I'm trying to get, or you know,
totally.
Agreed. Yep.
One of the things I like that you showed, Mario, is the organization and how you think about your performance. I can't say that I've thought that far into like just the layout of the thing. Like, it's dope that you know, so the bottom four, the analog machines at the bottom four, you can put your drums right above those. That way you got easy access to be able to mute things. So someone just asked though, but I think we do have this function though. It says no multiple mute with function, same as rhythm in K2. Yeah, you can just hit function and hit as many mute buttons as you want.
Yeah, you can, but I believe what they might be talking about is the on the rhythm, it's called cue. I think it's like you're cueing the mute, so you could hold function and press this, and they would light blue, and then basically when you let it go, then it'll mute all those selected one at once.
I got you. So you can time it better and have I got you. It's
so it's not on here. It's a cool trick, because when you're getting stuff, you could kind of queue up your mutes, but that feature is not on this one. I'll let the folks in Sweden know about that. I think that's cool mute mode.
Cool. Yo, what's up, Erica? No doubt. I was when I came down to the Elektron spot, I was pleased to see Erica in there too. I was like, oh, this is Erica. She's back there ripping machines apart and put them back together in 2.5 seconds.
Yep.
That's dope. So you know something else? So queuing mutes, that makes sense. That sounds like
I got a quick question for you. What's the power of this thing as far as an external sequencer? Like, can it drive all the rest of your gear? Do you get access to that full sequencer for if I want to sequence my modular gear or whatever else,
Good question. You do. The way that it is, it's each track has ability to be a MIDI track. You could select that as a machine, so you're sacrificing that track's audio. But if I go here to MIDI, and I actually have this just for another demonstration as well too, with its class compliant audio and MIDI. So I have this Animoog app, and I'm playing it, and it's processing the audio through there. But I set the channel to MIDI channel 1. Let's see, find a.
Yeah.
So you could send it over USB, but also with MIDI as well. You have you could select the MIDI channel. You also have sound bank sub-bank, my bad. Program, pitch bend, aftertouch that you could apply with parameter locking as well. Mod wheel, and then this is breath control. So that's all assignable depending on in your MIDI setup. And then you also have 8 slots that you could select what MIDI CC you want to send to that. So depending on what device you are, you would just have to reference what MIDI CC, and then here you activate that, and you have up to 8 different values that you could change with the device, but also apply parameter locks to that as well. And then an
that is just, I just got to take pause right there. That is super dope that you could use something like an iOS app instrument or external instrument, but then you can set parameters up to 8 parameters and parameter lock those joints for the external instrument. I don't know if that resonates loud enough. I think
one thing that you can do with it too is say it's like the same thing, the same settings as the Digitag, but you can. I've used it to control a VST. So if I was playing live and I didn't want to bring an extra controller, I use the actual piece of hardware to control a VST in Ableton or something like that.
Yeah, that's nice. Like, because I'm so used to the Digiform, like I'll have my Digitag plugged in, and when I'm making stuff in Ableton, I'll just use that because I have 8 MIDI tracks on the bottom. So I use it as my MIDI controller in there while write stuff. I don't use a sequencer on it, but I'm streaming audio over USB. So it's a good, like I said, utility if you looking for a device and say you don't have enough money for an interface and a box. This can be used. Any of the digis and the analog devices could be used as a sound card. So you just plug it in, and then you can plug in your monitors here and use it as an interface. And also it has input. So you have 2 inputs that you could use to record audio into your DAW. And also the MIDI controller to be able to control any VST software or iOS app. So not only is it the dope drum machine and synthesizer, but it actually checks off a lot of boxes for like somebody that, again, can't afford every piece of gear needed to connect it. All this thing kind of allows that to.
Right, or you just want to only use one device to keep everything streamlined, like because like even when I used it to control a VST in Ableton, it can also send program changes in the bank, so you can actually even change the voices using the hardware to have it jump to a different preset. Does that make
it does? Yeah, no,
right? But yeah, it's really handy. So then that way you can use like a whole library of VST sounds.
Yeah, and even in MIDI as well, it sends the program changes through MIDI. So any of your hardware, since like I said, the bank, or where was I? The sound bank or sub bank and bank, it's all dependent on obviously the MIDI device that you're controlling. If you're some vintage gear can't change as fast as Elektron sequencer could fire out. So that's one thing, but I've used it where like you go here and just change the bank, the sound program for each step, and it'll just go crazy on your hardware device.
That's dope.
Yeah. Super.
Is there any other
questions?
So there was some talk in the chat about just like the screen and not everybody has can necessarily see on that size of screen, and they were talking about some of that and having some limitations, but it was brought up with the Overbridge, which I think is a really great tool, and the fact that you can just utilize it in your DAW and be able to see all those parameters as large as you can open it up.
And with that, you don't necessarily, it doesn't have to just open up in a DAW. It also has a standalone. So if you just want to plug in your device to your computer, you could open up standalone, see all the parameters, and also have the ability to record each track individually or the stereo out. So yeah, all of the 12 tracks plus the effects track as well. So there is a way. Obviously, it's not in the hardware, so kind of you are limited to the screen that's on the device. But there is a way that if you needed to, you can put it on the Overbridge and see everything and be able to control everything as well with the software.
That's dope. For those that don't know, can you tell folks, just briefly what Overbridge is?
Yeah. So Overbridge is a software that allows you to connect to your Elektron device, available for the Digitakt, Digitone, Syntakt, Analog Rhythm, and Analog 4, and Analog Heat. Not available for the Octatrack and not available for the model series. But basically what it is, it's the ability to open it up as a software or a plugin as VST or audio unit. And that gives you access to all the parameters on the screen. You can control them with the screen, and it all reacts both on hardware and feedbacks bidirectionally. So whatever you do on the hardware reflects on the software and vice versa. And with that, that's super cool because then you could automate stuff in your DAW, automate multiple parameters that you wouldn't normally be able to do with just two hands. And also the ability to stream all your audio tracks available. So individually, be able to set them up in your DAW and record them individually, so you could process them individually or mix them and do finish tracks, how mixing them however you would want. So it's a really nice, powerful software that is compatible with the devices, and yeah, it just makes recording stuff a lot easier. And some people, if you prefer working in the box, it's a great way to kind of bridge those two worlds together.
Yeah, real dope. It's a dope way to integrate, without a doubt. Let's see. Well, cool. You know what I'm thinking? So you can obviously see I've paired mine with is that screen thing is not going to come on, but I've paired mine with the Analog Heat. And that could be just about anything, but I think obviously any of your stuff pairs well with the Analog Heat. But one of the things I was wishing for is a compressor at the end. And I know typically you can't talk about whether or not there's plans, but I just want to throw that in there that like, yo, put that joint on there so we can have it.
Yeah. There's I always find a way to make these things work. But let's say, for example, I got this sound. And then let's just get like a chord sound or something. And just do that. So now let's put this here. Make sure that it goes. Just have it hold. All right, cool. Cool. All right, so let me bring this down a little bit. And what I'm going to do is apply this, route this chord sound machine to the effects track. So I have this ability to do that filter, but then also on the amp page, you have this envelope that applies negative value to the amp volume. So let's see, let's just record a simple. I'm going to copy this drum pattern, very sloppy, but now I'll paste that on the effects track sequencer. And now every time these hit, it's going to apply a negative value to the amp page. So you hear it's kind of like ducking it. So that's a way to do some sidechain compression. But yeah,
That's dope.
It's not a crazy compressor. But again, with the if you wanted to just route everything, you could add some the analog drive, overdrive to it, which sounds pretty good.
So see, I think, you know what I think you just proved our earlier point that like once you really get to know the machine and you think a little bit outside the box, you kind of know what the tool set is, you can get creative and do almost anything you could imagine.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also just the connectivity part of it. Like, again, I know you can't have every device, but like if you have a laptop, then just run it, record it, and run that through a compressor on your plugin, because you can plug it in over USB and just record that real quick, or on your phone, record it into Koala or something, and then use that as your drums or whatever app that you use, Cubase kind of DAW. So that's kind of what my solution to compression is. I'll record stuff into Overbridge, and then I'll process things differently, because I'm gonna compress my drums a separate way than I'm gonna compress my melodic parts.
Dope.
Yeah, very cool.
Yes, and then to Ted, yes, it is kind of like a ducking, and it's cool because you could apply it. It could be applied to the trigs that you set down. I mean, it would be nice to just route that audio, but it could do some weird stuff as well too. You're not just stuck on just using the audio as your input for the trigger of the envelope. You could do some creative ducking.
Now, here's I think the most important question of the day. Who made these pictures and who splashed juice on that Syntakt like that?
Yeah, man. Every time I see that picture, I get scared.
Somebody's like, yo, put the drink over there.
That's that musical sex funk that is just spewing all over it. That's when you know you in the heat.
You in heat. Word. All right. Well, yo, how much is it going for?
$9.99, I believe.
Yep, that's what I'm seeing when I'm looking at the plethora of commonly referred to sites.
Yes. $9.99. We have them constantly being made. So if it's not in stock at your preferred retail space, then hit them up. Wait, because they're building them and they're shipping them out as fast as they can. When I say they, I mean Elektron.
Yeah, right?
Yes, yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about is because we're in a weird place nowadays, yo, and I'm sure we all know this is for obvious reasons. But when it comes to gear, and maybe it's always been like this, I kind of don't think so. But the people and the features and everybody is a damn expert, right? And as soon as something drops, everybody only has all the most negative things to say about something long before they ever touch the thing. You know what I'm saying? And so, I'm glad Ken asked, were some of the machines refined? Are they the same? Or, you know what I mean? You answered that already, which I'm glad you got a chance to address, because I think it's important to note that, while this is a hybrid drum machine and there are some machines that may come from other machines, it's not just like a throw together. You all obviously took a lot of time to put together a dope machine here. I saw somebody online. There was a lot of people saying, yo, why in the hell would that be $9.99? And saying that the price is too much. So I got a couple things for that. One is obviously we're in a different day and age now. I think what we're going to start to see is a lot of things are going to cost more. But secondly, I saw online is somebody tore down, or at least opened it up next to a Digitac or a Digitone or something. I think it was Digitone. And they opened it up, and the density of the circuit board on the Syntakt actually kind of
I saw that.
You saw that, Ken?
Yeah,
Like,
it's pretty impressive how much stuff is crammed in there.
It really is a lot of stuff crammed in there. So I feel like this is one of those things. Those are one of those things that it's tough for the general consumer to know that kind of stuff. That it went to. There's a lot more components involved on this, and there's obviously a lot more involved.
Right.
You all there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that maybe that's something that nobody would really ever want to know. But I think all that stuff matters when it comes down to somebody saying, why in the hell would that cost that much? Was because people think that companies just arbitrarily try to gouge or something. And which has been like a common sort of comment lately on certain things. But I just wanted to kind of mention that. What's your thoughts on that, Mario?
Yeah, I mean, again, it is tough, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to have access to gear like this. But I totally agree, and I understand where people come from, because it's not always easy. But again, with something I can't speak about anything else, but it's particularly to the Syntakt. You're right. The under the hood, it is a lot heavier than the devices. And yeah, the engineering behind it is kind of really amazing. The team over there in Sweden, how they were able to get all these components and get it into this small package as well. So there's that design aspect as well, because it could have been bigger, and maybe that would have, in people's mind, made it more expensive.
That's a psychological thing. It totally is. Like when people see this box and it's the same size as the other boxes, and then but it has all these features in it, and even you've just explained at least 3 different things that this does that are kind of new to the whole sort of paradigm of the workflow. And I think psychologically, and that happens with modules too. You might see a module that could be, I don't know, 14 HP, but it might be 20, and that might warrant another $100. You know what I mean? But
or you could go the opposite route and make it like the size of a thimble, like other companies, and charge way more.
That's true. That's becoming the new trend. No doubt. So I mean, I think it's something psychological about that. Maybe if this was the size of, machine drum.
What is this, a drum machine for ants?
We've seen it out there. So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing though. And like my man Why Not said, no, it's much worse now. So many comments, opinions have been really wild, and it is true. And I always get a kick out of people form these incredibly wild opinions before they even touch the box, or before they even see more than the first 1-minute video about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think we're gonna try to do as much now that, I mean, it's crazy out there, but we know that it is a responsibility not only to just show up, but then also like educate what the device does, so people could actually find out for themselves and not listen to somebody else talk on a microphone on a website. So let the experience dictate, or not dictate, but just help you determine what you want and find what you like. Because again, Syntakt is super dope, and I'll always use it. It's not for everybody. Somebody might not want a digital and analog drum machine. Somebody might want a pure analog drum machine that they build, and it's like it, or it's just they would rather use samples. So it's not, you're not wrong for not liking it, but also it's a good tool, and I think it's just about depending on where you're at, it's a synthesizer, sound processor as well. And if you just try not to find a problem so that this could solve it, but if you really feel like this could really solve a lot of things that I want to accomplish in terms of my sound and my music, I think that's the gear though.
Yeah, and I would challenge anybody to, and this is probably with any synthesis, but specifically with the Syntakt, I had mentioned on one of the forums or Facebook pages, like, yo, I think for hip hop cats who are not traditionally ones to dig into an electron box like this, not to say that no one has, but I definitely think that that's one of the things I know I used to kind of look at drum machines and be like, sampling, that's what I'm about. You know what I mean? It's a lot of the synthesis. And I think one of the things to remember with Syntakt, for anybody that might do hip hop and other types of music, like there's a lot of capability in this. And I mentioned that on the FB page. There's a lot of capability in this. It's just kind of limited by whatever your creative sort of choices are, creative imagination might be, or your know-how with synthesis of the machines and the devices inside. And then someone chimed in, of course, there's always an exact opposite naysayer. Whenever you want to, was like, I find the machines to be very limited. And I think, okay, that's probably valid for him, and if he's used it and stuff. But I don't know that I really don't find the machines to be limited. What I do find them is to be customized to the thing that they're supposed to do. If it's classic snare, then you're going to get parameters that are related to classic snare. If it's plastic kick, you're going to get parameters that are related to a kick, so forth and so on. And all those things might be different, but still within those parameters, you have a lot of flexibility to make that into something cool. And also the first time you mess, like for instance, the chord machine.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes it'll be like I find myself making the same kind of chord sounds with it until I maybe put down a pattern with it and then start to tweak things. And you're now changing things in a way that's non-traditional to the way you would do sound design. You know what I mean? And so
Hey, with the with the fact of having Overbridge, that lets you get beyond just the fact that you have only 2 outputs on it, right? Like you can break out each channel into its own channel, right?
That is correct.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just kind of looking at one. I was looking at one on a site, and I'm like, maybe. I'm trying to hold myself back, but yeah. That was like the first thought was like about external processing and whatnot on it.
Yeah, and back to kind of what you were saying, Corey, just to kind of finish that thought really quick. The Beatppl podcast, you have a audience. I'm sure it's expanded, but like for hip hop, that's what my roots are from in terms of how I approach music. It always goes and changes, but for that, like and especially hip hop and producers that use samplers, I feel like this is a great companion with any sampler, whether that be SP404 Mark 1, Mark 2, whether that's a Digitech, whether that's an MPC, especially with like MPC Live or the newer ones, because it has class compliant USB audio, you could just plug in this straight into your MPC and just record your stereo out, and then just use this as basically like a plugin, a hardware plugin for your MPC. If that's your main sequencing tool, then you just sequence stuff, you compose some crazy stuff, sample that, retune it, repitch it, chop it up and slice it. So now you're creating your own samples and therefore creating your own sound as well. Sampling is a great way to take a piece of something and make it your own. But if the sound source is like your music, then you could start from there, and just the possibilities are pretty wild.
It's endless. It is endless, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that's literally what I have set up right here.
Yep.
I didn't set up a sequence or anything, but yeah, the Syntakt is going into the MPC Live, and I could use those together. And this is just basically another sound source with all the flexibility that comes with the Syntakt. But now I got my primary source of beat making with this added sort of arsenal of sounds and even the sequencing and stuff in there that I can do a lot of damage with that, and just add a whole new dimension to the music. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And whether you perform or not, like it's great to have those performance tricks, because there's going to be stuff that I could speak for myself that I can't recreate in a sequencer or in a pattern. If like me changing a certain parameter or doing control all, I'd rather just record that, sample it, and be like, all right, let me just flip this how I want it to sound. But having that hands-on tactile control of a software or hardware, in addition to with the sampler, that's why I really think like that's going to be my setup, this in a Digitakt, because it's just sample my sound, redo it, and then do my drums, sample that into Digitakt. Now I have more tracks here, and it's just a different workflow, changing parameters on a synthesis versus changing the tune on samples. You get that.
Yeah,
cool.
It's a different deal. Yep.
Well, you get a little more control too. I mean, a sample is already burned audio, so I mean, you can do a lot with it, but when you can actually take a sound, like sculpt the sound itself to create it, takes it to a whole nother level.
True.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, cool. Yo, I think we are right about at a little bit over an hour. So anybody got anything they want to ask Mario or talk about the Syntakt before we close out? Any questions out there in the chat?
Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Thanks for coming. It's good to see you again on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's happy to see you guys with your devices. Can hit us up, your homie. So you could either go to your preferred retailer or
yeah, no doubt. I got a bunch of gear I got to sell, so I got to sell some stuff and then buy some stuff. That's always
that's how it
ebb
goes.
and flow.
Yeah, that's right.
Sell by.
It's shipping and receiving.
Yep.
Yeah. Now it looks dope though, because I keep looking at it, and one of the things that I liked about the rhythm was it's a really wild ass sequencer, and I kept like wanting to use it as kind of the main sequencer for my modular drums and all that stuff. And I have my modular drums are tied in via MIDI as well, so it's like it was always kind of like just a little bit big for that purpose. And I kind of initially bought the rhythm because I wanted, the kind of 12-bit sampler with the analog circuit and all that stuff. And it does that. I think that thing sounds fantastic. But the workflow, I just found myself like kind of going to other things, but I was always kind of like kicking myself because I was like, man, the way that I use it was such a waste because it could do so much and do so many cool things. And I was like, if it kind of would fit into my setup a little bit differently, I could see myself really using that. And then I see this thing and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can use that sequencer, and, like the probability and like those kinds of things that the Elektron sequencers do, that and the micro timing and stuff is all stuff that like you really don't get out of other sequencers. Like, I've got like the Force and the 2400 and stuff, and you can do sort of certain things, but really Elektron specializes in that very microscopic timing thing. And then also being able to like add in changes that you didn't necessarily program, but you programmed the machine to allow it to do those sorts of things. And that's always really fun. And the way that I tend to use my modular drums to begin with, like now I have to run through multiple things. Like I'll have like a what is it, like KeyStep Pro, and then I'm tying that together with a trigger riot to get probability and stuff that's like on a more intricate level and all. And realistically, I could just have that one little box and be good to go.
Yep. And then depending on the device, like if it's a Syntakt, then you got some synthesis. If it's a Digitakt, then you got a sampler.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's you're totally right on that in terms of like telling device what to do, setting the parameters and the rules so that it turns into like a songwriting companion. Like you put some stuff into it, but then it just spits it right back out.
It starts evolving on you. Yeah.
So yeah, and Cool Doug, yes, I see that question and I hear it loud and clear. I want that as well.
So the question is, can you tell the fine folks in Sweden to add that keyboard folding to Digitone? So duly noted. There's a couple other questions here before we get out of here. I want to be able to drop on you. here. Can we use the synth built in with a MIDI keyboard?
That's how I have it set up right now.
Yes. You have
Mhm.
MIDI in over USB. So if you want to use Ableton as your kind of clock, but then have your hardware, and yeah, MIDI keyboard, depending on which track you set, that'll be what the keyboard's selecting, and you have MIDI setup. Sorry, my overhead camera died, even though it's plugged in, so I can't change. But you could change how you want it to control. If you want to use a MIDI keyboard just to control one track, then you could set that, or on an auto track, so it goes auto, configures to the track selected automatically.
Yeah, that's how I have it right now. I took it out. I was using it in my live setup, but I brought it over to my desk and I'm using my launch key. And yeah, it makes it a lot more fun too, because then I can have a sequence on the actual device, but then I can also play along and add an extra layer of the sequence with the keyboard.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dope. And what's this? Someone said, can you explain Syntakt ST setup, Mario?
Cool.
I think he meant he later posted Syntakt Digitech.
Oh, Digitech.
Right? I think so, like the combo or something.
Oh, Syntakt Digitech. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
I was thinking, I don't know. I thought Syntakt or SY would be the Syntakt, but I figured they got it. Good.
Yeah,
good
I mean, the way that I do it, it's kind of different ways. If I want to use the effects track, then I'll route the audio from the Digitakt into the Syntakt. That's kind of how I've been using it. But then I'll send MIDI out from the Digitakt into the Syntakt, so that Digitakt is the main clock. And because I have those additional 8 MIDI tracks, I'll use that as additional LFOs for the Syntakt. So the Syntakt on a sound, you have 2 LFOs, but with the Digitakt, depending on which track, up to 8 MIDI tracks, I could assign it to here and then start modulating stuff with that. But then the other side of that as well is that I'll run the Syntakt into the Digitakt, and stuff that I compose on Syntakt, I'll just sample that into Digitakt and flip it in there, or sample some sounds. Oh, there goes my other camera. Let me see.
That's good. It makes sense though, having a Syntakt connected and then using the Digitakt to be able to resample and and move on and kind of keep building on it that way. That's a dope way.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, I'm trying to go to my thing. If not, then that might be it.
We might. It was about that time. There you go.
Yeah.
Track variations. What do you think he means by track variations? Lengths of tracks?
Sequencer is track. The one feature I'd wish for in the Elektron feature is track variations. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, there's scaling per. You could change the length per track. You could have different scales per track, and then also but I maybe like variations of how it plays, like forward and backwards, or
that could be
cool, actually.
That's the one thing that it doesn't have. But there's a lot of cool tricks that when you're actually working with the device, like you could copy and paste a lot of the trigs there. So if you have something saved, you could copy stuff and paste them, and it working really quick. Like you said, it's just the more you work with it, you get familiar with the actual workflow, and then you start figuring out that there is a way to do something you want to do, but it's not particularly how you thought before. It's kind of like a workaround or cheat code.
Dope. Well, yo, on that note, Ted says thanks and for explaining Digitakt, Syntakt. I want to thank everybody for jumping on and joining, and hopefully this is one of those shows that people come back and reference later. Feel free to repost and reference whatever you might need to do, and we'll see you on the flip side. I'm just turning this joint up.
Yep, that sounds good.
right. Peace, y'all.